Look at this chalkboard. In the 1970s, fixing education meant fixing what was written on the board. School reform focused on internal curriculum upgrades, introducing new math, updating foreign language instruction, or expanding comprehensive schooling. Today, the expectations have shifted. Education policy is no longer confined to the subjects taught. Instead, the school system is deployed as a primary macroeconomic lever to solve broad socioeconomic inequalities and secure national economic competitiveness. This shift creates a structural paradox. Teacher preparation programs are trapped in a vice. On one side, they face intense pressure to deliver rigorous, highly scrutinized professional standards. On the other, they must survive against aggressive market deregulation that lowers the barrier to entry for new educators. The result is an American teacher education apparatus that functions as a loosely coupled system. It is a highly fragmented patchwork of thousands of programs and providers, operating in a state of constant flux. To understand the pressures fracturing and reshaping this traditional architecture, we have to map the 5 distinct structural vectors driving this crisis. The first vector is the transfer of educational policy control. For decades, oversight lived at the state level. Over time, that authority migrated upward to a centralized federal nexus. That federal centralization accelerated in the early 2000s. The No Child Left Behind mandate established severe top-down testing requirements that linked federal funding to student test scores. Subsequent administrations tightened that grip. Initiatives like Race to the Top and the Every Student Succeeds Act required states to adopt national standards and tie teacher evaluations directly to student performance. This created a regime of hard accountability. Compliance and oversight moved from university campuses to external rating agencies and federal entities, which now dictate whether a preparation program survives or loses its accreditation. This chart visualizes the primary statistical mechanism used to enforce that accountability: value-added models. The algorithm tracks K-12 student test scores, calculates the teacher's perceived effect, and maps that data backward to evaluate their university. These scores feed into a binary system of sanctions and rewards, assigning programs into strict quality tiers. The financial stakes attached to these tiers are absolute. If a program falls into a lower tier, it loses access to critical federal grant money, crippling its ability to operate. To survive this hard accountability, traditional programs are forced to divert their resources. Time and funding that could be spent on foundational pedagogical research are instead consumed by strict data compliance and assessment management. As top-down accountability squeezes universities, a second vector, the professionalization, squeezes educator autonomy directly at the classroom level. To guarantee standardized outcomes, districts increasingly adopt the scripted curriculum. Teachers are handed mandated step-by-step instructional guides, reducing their role from autonomous professionals capable of dynamic decision-making to mere technicians delivering pre-packaged content. This creates a glaring policy contradiction. States demand historically high student test scores, but to combat the inevitable teacher shortages, they simultaneously lower certification requirements, allowing candidates with minimal or no formal training to run classrooms. This line chart displays the immediate labor symptoms of that contradiction. As university enrollment in teacher preparation plummets 36%, the early career attrition rate spikes to nearly 50% within the first 5 years on the job. Mid-career professionals are also leaving the profession at the highest rates recorded in 25 years. By systematically stripping educators of their professional agency and treating them as interchangeable technicians, the system engineered its own unsustainable labor crisis. The third vector requires looking at how university programs are adapting internally to survive these dual pressures of accountability and attrition. They are replacing passive theoretical lectures with pedagogies of enactment. Active clinical practice is now the operational standard for training new teachers. Traditional low-stakes micro-teaching among peers is being phased out. Instead, candidates navigate complex, iterative cycles of practice in controlled environments, such as virtual reality simulation laboratories filled with responsive digital student avatars. Other universities have adopted the medical training model. Teacher candidates step into high-stakes emotional scenarios, like difficult parent-teacher conferences, using trained adult actors to simulate the psychological weight of the real job. Programs also utilize interactive computer simulations, specifically engineered to hone rapid-fire classroom management skills, allowing candidates to fail safely before ever facing real children. This practice is paired with modern coaching technology. Candidates record their actual classroom sessions, then review, tag, and analyze their own teaching videos to receive immediate, targeted corrective feedback from their instructors. These intense cycles focus relentlessly on mastering specific, granular core practices, like how to respond to a student's incorrect math answer, rather than memorizing broad educational philosophies. Mastering these high-intensity clinical enactments provides the hard empirical evidence traditional university programs need to prove their efficacy over fast-track, low-barrier alternatives. The fourth vector is the demographic imperative, a foundational shift altering the ground truth of the American K-12 classroom. This chart tracks the demographic breakdown of public schools. In 2014, the system crossed a strict statistical threshold, with Latino, African American, and Asian students collectively becoming the demographic majority. When you overlay that reality with the data on testing, you see a static 20-point achievement gap in reading and mathematics that has persisted without meaningful change since 1992. For decades, policy attempted to close this gap using context-blind interventions. These strategies applied a uniform, undifferentiated curriculum that ignored the linguistic and cultural realities of the modern student body. They failed. The necessary structural adaptation is culturally responsive teaching. This framework trains educators to actively leverage a student's cultural background and community knowledge as direct academic assets for learning, rather than treating diversity as a hurdle. In a majority-minority ecosystem, a teacher preparation program simply cannot succeed unless it structurally embeds this cultural competency into the absolute core of its clinical training. The fifth and final vector is marketization, the shattering of the traditional university monopoly by aggressive market forces. Faced with regional shortages, states changed their licensing laws, actively inviting entirely new, non-traditional providers into the teacher education pipeline. Look at the ecosystem today. The centralized university model has shattered into dozens of decentralized nodes, including independent nonprofits, specialized district-level academies, and massive online programs. This deregulation triggered an influx of venture capital and for-profit entities, drawn by low operational costs and high-volume demand. These alternative providers bypass rigorous clinical requirements entirely, offering fast-track entry directly into the classroom. Political administrations frequently support this privatization. They actively push for charter school designs and alternative pathways that operate outside traditional oversight. This intense competition for market share completely fragments the field. When providers are fighting for enrollment and funding, it obstructs any attempt at systemic collaboration or broad national improvement. The proliferation of low-cost alternative providers leaves traditional universities with a mandate. They must justify their premium, time-intensive clinical models with hard, undeniable evidence of superior classroom efficacy. American teacher education is caught in a vice. Programs are trapped between algorithmic federal accountability, aggressive low-barrier market competitors, and the urgent necessity to deliver intense clinical and culturally responsive pedagogy. To survive, traditional university programs must execute a specific structural strategy, known as boundary crossing. This map illustrates the solution. Universities must form networked improvement communities, binding academic researchers directly with local K-12 practitioners in the field. Integrating pre-service preparation directly into local classrooms creates a continuous, evidence-based feedback loop. Data flows freely from the first day of university training straight through a teacher's critical first years on the job. The teaching profession cannot weather this macroeconomic crisis from the safety of the campus. It has to abandon academic isolation and rebuild a rigorous, locally embedded professional agenda, one that clearly outcompetes both policy technicians and market disruptors.